Good morning, and welcome everyone, and thank you very much for being here today. I'm Christian Menefee, the Harris County Attorney, and we're here today to discuss a fair chance hiring policy for Harris County that my office is going to be presenting to Commissioners Court for adoption. I'm extremely grateful to be joined today by the Harris County Judge, Lena Hidalgo, and the Commissioner for Precinct 1, Rodney Ellis. I'm grateful to them for being here, but also for the work that they've done to enhance criminal justice reform in Harris County. Forgive us because we're still kind of dealing with COVID, and so we try to keep it light up here, but I want to extend a special thank you to the Harris County Administrator, Dave Berry, and the head of HR, Shane Carazol, for their work on this project and for the collaboration that I know we're going to have when we're working to implement this after it is adopted by Commissioners Court. Look, folks, Harris County is a big place. We're more populous in 25 states, the third most populous county in the country. We have a lot of residents, and we have a lot of residents who have served time. They can be trusted, they are qualified, and they have the skills to do good work. And so we're here today to talk about what Harris County is going to do to give them the opportunity to do that good work with county government, which you'll hear from Judge Hidalgo is a very large employer. We employ tens of thousands of folks throughout the county. Now, there's been substantial research on the breadth of our country's criminal justice system and the impacts on folks with criminal records when they are discarded from the job search, when they are prevented from getting gainful employment. We know that 1 in 3 Americans have, in their lifetime, had some interaction with the criminal justice system. And these are folks who are skilled, who have worker skills. And study after study has shown that when employers ask the question of criminal history on the application, they tend to pre-screen the applicant at that point and screen them out of the employment process. And this happens because it's done so early that the employer doesn't give proper context to the crime itself, to the position that the applicant is employing for, and how those two things interact, right? Rehabilitation and other mitigation efforts. So the goal here is to decrease those instances from happening. That means that there are millions of parents throughout this country who have been caught up in the criminal justice system and who are being either unemployed or underemployed and forced out of the workforce. And there are millions of children who will grow up with circumstances of financial hardship because their parents don't have the ability to participate in the workforce. And we know that it's true in no place more than the state of Texas, which has one of the highest incarceration rates in our entire country. And of course, importantly, we know that African Americans, Latino people, minorities, people of color are disproportionately impacted by the criminal justice system, which means that they are disproportionately impacted by the different efforts that employers take to pre-screen these candidates out of the employment process. So this policy is about removing the stigma for these folks and giving them a fair opportunity to participate in the employment process at Harris County. But this policy is also about decreasing recidivism. We know that the number one factor for decreasing recidivism amongst ex-offenders is ensuring that they are able to obtain and maintain stable employment. And so this policy is in part designed to combat that issue and make our communities more safe. This is about decreasing recidivism, but ensuring that these folks are not only rehabilitated, but able to reintegrate back into their communities and have gainful employment. So here's a summary of the policy. For most positions at the county, what this policy will do is first ban the box. It will prohibit departments from including on their applications a question about the applicant's criminal history. Second, it will prohibit departments from considering an applicant's record of arrest if that arrest did not result in a conviction, right? So if it was, or if it didn't, it was expunged or sealed, or if it's a misdemeanor for which no jail time can be sentenced. Third, the policy will allow departments to do a criminal history check and consider that check only after a conditional offer of employment has been extended. And again, that's for the very reason that I just mentioned. When you do the check earlier in the process and there hasn't been a meaningful opportunity to engage the applicant, employers are more likely to screen that potential employee out of the process. Whereas when it's done later and there's been more engagement by both sides, there's more investment in the potential employee and the applicant, the employer is much more likely to consider proper things. And fourth and finally, the policy will prohibit blanket disqualification of applicants solely because they have a conviction. Instead, what it's going to call for is an individualized assessment, right, of various factors, including what was the nature of the offense, what is the position that the applicant is applying for, how long has it been since the conviction, is the applicant able to show that since the time of conviction they've had gainful employment and there haven't been any issues that have arisen. But the point there is to ensure that our departments are making a good faith determination, looking specifically at the context, at the facts surrounding the criminal history record, and not instead just blanketly disqualifying the applicant because they have a record. Now, a couple of things I want to point out. If this policy is adopted by Commissioners Court, it will apply to the departments that have unelected department heads. The elected officials at the county can adopt the policy, and I encourage them to do so. My office will be doing so. Importantly, where state and federal law or regulations either require a criminal history check, require the question to be on the application, or require disqualification, in those instances, we're going to comply with the law. And so, the most obvious example is there are many law enforcement positions that require these things. And so in those instances, we're going to follow the law. And there's also going to be appropriate scrutiny given to sensitive positions, right? There are certain positions at Harris County that require employees to interact with children unsupervised, or interact with the elderly, or transport hazardous materials. Those positions are going to be in a different category, and they will be appropriately scrutinized. Last thing I want to point out before I pass it over to Judge Hidalgo is fair chance policies, folks, are widely supported throughout our country. There have been 37 states and over 150 cities and counties that have adopted some form of a fair chance policy, and it's not a partisan issue. There have been governors in states across the country that have issued executive orders putting in place fair chance policies. They've been both Democratic and Republican. So these aren't, just the states that you would think about, but we're also talking about Georgia, Louisiana, Oklahoma, Kentucky, Kansas, right? These policies are good government, they're good policy, and that's why you've seen that they've been adopted throughout the country by members of both parties. And so to that end, I strongly hope that I will earn the support of all members of Commissioners Court because, my office worked really hard on this, and I believe that if we're trying to ensure that we're decreasing recidivism, if we're trying to ensure that we're giving a fair chance to Harris County residents who have served their time and who are trying to get back into the workforce to make a better life for their families, it shouldn't be a partisan issue. It should be a good government issue. So with that, I will turn it over to Judge Hidalgo, and then we'll hear from Commissioner Ellis, and then we'll take some questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, County Attorney Menefee, for leading the charge on this and so many important issues, voting rights, you name it, environmental protection. You're doing so much to make sure that through this office we're protecting our community. And of course, Commissioner Ellis, I can never say it enough, your fight for folks that many times are forgotten. And this is part of that effort. So thank you for that. We're announcing a proposal that will allow Harris County to join these 37 states and over 150 cities and counties across America in removing questions about an applicant's criminal history from county employment applications until after the applicant has been fairly evaluated. This fair chance hiring effort, which is nicknamed Ban the Box, will prohibit Harris County government from asking about this history before determining if they're otherwise qualified for a position. So the criminal history will only be considered once they've been given a fair chance over generally their qualifications, their experience, etc. These Ban the Box efforts are not new. They've been going on for at least a couple of decades, and they arose because too often employers were discriminating against individuals who'd had a brush with the law. What happened is, and what still happens is, you take these folks out of the applicant pool before they ever have a chance to really apply. It's estimated that nearly 1 in 3 adults, or more than 1 in 4, across the United States, so that's 70 million people, have arrest or conviction records. By that measure, over 1 million people in Harris County have an arrest or conviction record and face the stigma that could be keeping them from so much as applying for employment that would not only help them, help their families, and help our community as a whole. Harris County employs over 18,000 people, Harris County government. And so those positions should be open to residents from all walks of life. There have been studies that show, and there's a study of the National Employment Law Project that compiles all of this research, that the existence of a criminal record reduces job callbacks by 50% on average and by 60% for African American male applicants. With over 20 years of implementation, this Ban the Box Fair Chance Hiring Initiative has a growing body of research that has demonstrated that these policies increase the percentage of second chance hiring and don't have negative effects for employers. Quite the contrary, it's positive effects for the entire community. I think one thing is key, and County Attorney Menefee mentioned this in passing, and that is the public safety aspect of this. If we want to be a county that is serious about enhancing public safety, we have to be willing to give those re-entering our society a way out, a way to continue their lives, a fair chance to achieve gainful employment, to support their families, to participate in the community fully. Do we want to be a county that traps people in a cycle of incarceration and conviction once again and joblessness? Or do we want to be the type of county that gives folks a chance to get back on their feet? Do we want to be a county that creates a permanent underclass? Or do we want to be a county that allows folks to rise and be better than the worst thing they ever did? And of course, we have to remember that this is not just a public safety issue, it is an economic issue. With COVID right now, with the economy still needing to fully recover, it's important that folks not be disqualified for jobs. We've all heard the stories of folks who made a mistake early in life. Maybe it was a minor nonviolent marijuana offense during college or high school. Maybe it was a minor shoplifting charge. Those convictions shouldn't haunt you and make you unemployable for a lifetime. And that's what this policy is about. It's not a silver bullet to fix so many barriers that exist to justice, to opportunity, but it goes a long way. And it's something that we really need to catch up on. So I very much hope that our colleagues will support this, and I especially hope that leaders in the private sector also follow Harris County's lead and the lead of so many states and so many cities and counties around the country led by both Democrats and Republicans. And so I look forward to voting in support of this policy later today, and I can't thank County Attorney Menefee enough for making this possible, for leading this forward. I'll briefly repeat my remarks in Spanish. Primero agradecerle al abogado del condado Christian Menefee, quien ha liderado este esfuerzo y tantos otros esfuerzos para proteger el derecho al voto, para proteger nuestro medio ambiente, y claro que también al comisionado Ellis, quien ha estado luchando por la justicia, la reforma al sistema penal por muchísimos años. Hoy estamos anunciando una propuesta que ayudará a que el condado Harris se una a 37 estados, más de 150 ciudades y condados a lo largo de nuestra nación, que tienen esta nueva política, el eliminar preguntas acerca de la historia criminal, de la historia penal de un solicitante, hasta después de que los aplicantes a un trabajo hayan sido evaluados justamente basados en sus méritos, en su experiencia, etc. Este esfuerzo se llama el esfuerzo de prohibir la caja, ban the box. Es algo que ha existido ya casi más de 20 años a través del país, con muy buenos resultados. Funciona así. Se prohíbe que el gobierno del condado Harris evalúe los antecedentes penales o siquiera le pregunte al aplicante si tiene antecedentes penales, sino hasta después de que hayan considerado todas las distintas características de ese aplicante. O sea, no se les descalificará automáticamente a ninguna persona por el hecho de tener una historia criminal. Estas iniciativas se crearon, surgieron porque por mucho tiempo los empleadores discriminaban contra de las personas que tenían historia criminal. De hecho, simplemente que haya una cajita que te pregunte si sí o no tienes un récord criminal, muchas veces lleva a que las personas simplemente no apliquen, que simplemente no apliquen. Se estima que casi 1 de 4 adultos y 1 de cada 4 personas, o sea, hasta 70 millones de personas a través de los Estados Unidos tienen un registro de condena o un registro de arresto. Eso significa que hay más de 1 millón de individuos en el condado Harris que tal vez enfrentan un estigma al aplicar a trabajos porque cometieron un crimen menor, se les encontró con marihuana, de repente, bueno, una cosa mínima que cometieron cuando eran jovencitos, cuando eran chicos. Han habido estudios que han demostrado que el tener un registro de condena o de arresto reduce la llamada para trabajo un 50% en promedio y un 60% para los hombres afroamericanos en los Estados Unidos. Hay muchísimas evaluaciones académicas de estos programas, ya que han existido por más de 20 años y demuestran que sí ofrecen más oportunidad para personas con antecedentes penales y que no llevan a fines negativos ni para el empleador ni para la sociedad. Al contrario, crean oportunidad económica. Todos hemos escuchado historias, de repente tenemos en nuestras familias personas que de niños de repente se les vio con marihuana, fueron y se robaron un dulce, una bobada y terminaron con un arresto, terminaron con una convicción. Esas cosas no deberían crear obstáculos al empleo por toda una vida. ¿Por qué? Porque al hacer eso lastimamos a aquella persona que comete un crimen menor, tal vez cuando eran muy jóvenes. Significa que no les damos una oportunidad, una segunda oportunidad para reintegrarse a la comunidad y al contrario los condenamos a toda una vida de no poder trabajar al nivel que ellos merecen basado en su habilidad. Esto tiene mucho que ver con la salud, la seguridad pública. Si no le damos oportunidades laborales a personas que han cometido un crimen menor, los estamos condenando a cometer más crímenes y a empeorar la situación económica de toda una comunidad, lo cual también impacta la seguridad pública. Entonces, si queremos ser serios en cuanto a incrementar la seguridad pública, esta iniciativa también nos va a ayudar. Y obviamente durante el COVID-19 necesitamos que continúe recuperándose nuestra economía, entonces eso también ayudará a la oportunidad económica en general. Miren, esto no es una solución milagrosa a la falta de oportunidad, ni tampoco a los temas de violencia que se están llevando a cabo, ni menos a la situación económica del COVID-19. Pero sí es una solución que existe, que es parte de las iniciativas que debemos llevar a cabo y me enorgullece apoyarla. Espero que mis colegas apoyen esta iniciativa y más que nada espero que los líderes en el sector privado también vean esto como una oportunidad y se unan tanto a nosotros como a tantos condados, tantos gobiernos, bien sea republicanos como demócratas, que están implementando este tipo de iniciativas que han sido muy eficientes y muy positivas. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm Rod Nellis. I want to thank the county attorney. Christian Menefee has done an outstanding job, and his team members have done a good job of working on this. Judge, thank you for your leadership. Here at Harris County, we have done a number of things to try and address the uptick in crime. This is another important tool in that toolbox. One thing I've found over my years in government is that one of the best ways to reduce criminal activity is for somebody to have a job, to have a good economy. And all this does is give someone an opportunity to get the interview, to be considered. It does not guarantee that you will get a job. Mr. Menefee, you did a good job. I think you mentioned 38 states, 150 cities and counties around the country. So as I look at this policy, as you went through it, your team has put together a policy where we benefit from any mistakes that other people have made. My office will adopt a policy. I hope that all other elected officials will do so as well. You do have a number of exceptions in there, so we comply with state and federal law. It's a good policy. It's an important policy. It's a big step, and I want to encourage you with your team to not just stop here. If there are other things that we can do, let's do it. So thank you.
Thank you, Judge Hidalgo and Commissioner Ellis. And with that, we'll take a few questions.
Perfect.
All right, thank you all very much.
All of y'all will apply.
Hey, hang on, just, I think the judge, if it's okay, she wants to make a couple remarks on COVID, because we got a couple of reporters who asked about it, very briefly.
So very briefly on COVID, obviously we're following the Omicron surge, which is impacting our community just as it is every other community. The bad news is that the cases are through the roof, historic highs. The good news is the hospitalizations are rising, but not as much as they had in previous waves relative to cases. Now, we don't know yet whether or not this wave can overwhelm our hospitals or not. And that's why what we continue to ask people is to get vaccinated and to get their booster. Folks with the booster, with the vaccination, much less likely to end up in the hospitals. And obviously, to the extent that our hospitals are full of COVID patients, that's when we have to divert the heart attacks and the strokes and the other resolvable issues. Now, we are hearing from some hospitals that they're needing additional staff because so much staff is out sick. And so we're receiving additional staff, around 900 additional staff here in the coming week for our region. Another thing that we have on Commissioner's Court today that I hope will be approved is funding almost $1 million for tests, for rapid tests to our schools. We hope to be able to provide kids with these tests who are symptomatic, who come into contact with somebody that has COVID, so if they get a negative test, they can go back to school. That'll help us keep our kids in school. It'll also help us control the virus. And of course, I want to remind folks there's plenty of testing capacity at our Harris County testing sites. Those are for the PCR tests. The results take a little bit longer to come back. Of course, they're more accurate. And so you can sign up for that at readyharris.org. En español brevemente, el COVID, la variante Omicron sigue incrementando de una manera rapidísima como está sucediendo a lo largo de todo el país. Y las malas noticias es que los casos han crecido de una manera exponencial, ya casi que ni caben en la gráfica. Las buenas noticias es que las hospitalizaciones sí han subido, pero no han subido tanto como ha sucedido en olas anteriores del virus comparado a los casos. No sabemos aún si las hospitalizaciones van a incrementar tanto que llenen a nuestros hospitales y prohíban el poder tratar a las personas con enfermedades más normales que un ataque al corazón, que un derrame, o tal vez mujeres embarazadas, lo que sucedió en olas anteriores cuando no había espacio para estas condiciones más comunes. Entonces, lo que debemos hacer ahora, primero, vacunarse, ponerse refuerzo, eso es lo que mantiene a las personas fuera del hospital, protege los hospitales. Vamos a recibir unos 900 trabajadores hospitalarios en las próximas semanas para nuestra región, ya que varios trabajadores, enfermeros, médicos están enfermos, han tenido que salir. Y finalmente, hoy hay una propuesta alrededor de $1 millón para aprobar pruebas, para que el condado Harris le ofrezca pruebas a nuestras escuelas, pruebas rápidas, para que los niños que tengan síntomas y hayan quedado en contacto con alguien con COVID puedan hacerse la prueba, salen negativos, puedan seguir estudiando. Así vamos a proteger el estudio de los niños, la rendimiento académico de los niños y también protegernos contra el virus. Como siempre vale la pena recordar, tenemos muchísima opción de pruebas en el condado Harris. Si necesita una prueba, las pruebas PCR, o sea, las que son tarda un poquito más recibir el resultado, pero el resultado pues es un poco más confiable que el de las pruebas rápidas. Hay muchísimo espacio, puede registrarse en readyharris.org si necesita una de esas pruebas y estaremos obteniendo más pruebas rápidas para darle a nuestros distritos escolares. Hoy día tenemos de nuestros indicadores, hay 3 que están en rojo y 1 que sigue en naranja. El que sigue en naranja es el de las hospitalizaciones. Un 12% de las hospitalizaciones son casos de COVID-19. Al llegar al 20% ya se subirá a nivel rojo. Entonces estamos observando, esperemos que eso no suceda. Está en nuestras manos el vacunarse, ponerse el refuerzo para mantener bajas las hospitalizaciones. Pero obviamente si sube vamos a tener que poner nivel nuevamente en rojo. Es posible que suceda en la próxima semana o 2 semanas, pero bueno, nosotros podemos controlar eso. Estamos listos para abrir más sedes de prueba. En este momento tenemos suficientes sedes. Entonces, en nuestras sedes están a 80% de la capacidad que tienen para ofrecer pruebas. Y sí estamos listos para abrir más, pero ahorita hay suficiente espacio. Entonces, si necesita una prueba, visita readyharris.org. The question was whether we'll be increasing the threat level to red. Right now, 3 indicators are in red. One of them is in orange. The one in orange is the hospitalizations. 12% of the ICU population is COVID positive. If we get to 20%, then we'll be at red. And that's completely in our hands. We can control that. If we get our vaccination, get our booster, that will keep folks from going to the hospital because of COVID. And so let's keep that from happening. It could happen in the next week or two if our hospitalizations continue to increase. And we are ready and on standby to open more testing sites from Harris County Public Health, but right now we're about at 80% capacity. So if you need a test, come on by, register at readyharris.org, but we are ready to go with vendors. If we need more sites, we'll open up more sites. Thank you.